Okay, let's jump right in. Today, we are tackling a true literary giant, Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. And I know, just the name itself can sound a little intimidating. But trust me, we're going to break it all down and figure out what makes this book so incredibly famous.
And when I say famous, I am not kidding. Just listen to this from critic Mark Van Doren, all the way back in 1941. He said it's generally considered the greatest novel of all novels. I mean, wow, that is a heck of a claim. And let's be real, a big part of that reputation comes from its sheer size. We just have to put it out there. The book is over 1,400 pages long. So yeah, if you've ever picked it up and felt a little overwhelmed, you are definitely not alone.
So that brings us right to the main event, the whole point of this explainer. What is the big idea here? What's going on behind all those pages and all those characters? What was Tolstoy really trying to say? Well, let's get into it. First up, let's talk about the first half of that title, war. But for Tolstoy, war isn't just about generals moving pins on a map. No, his whole take on war is actually a massive critique of how we even think about history.
You see, back then, the popular way of thinking was what's called the great man theory of history. It's this idea that history is basically just the story of a few incredible people, heroes, geniuses, emperors, making big decisions that change the world.
And Tolstoy? He thought that was absolute nonsense. He wanted to show that a battle isn't some neat and tidy chess match, controlled by one brilliant mind. Instead, it's what it really is, a totally unmanageable, chaotic whirlwind of thousands of individual people all acting at once. And he shows us this perfectly by comparing the two leaders. On one side, you have Napoleon, who Tolstoy paints as this fake hero, an insignificant tool of history, who's totally full of himself and thinks he's a genius. And on the other side, you've got the Russian commander, Kutuzov. Kutuzov is wise because he knows he's not in control. He just listens, he waits, and he understands the true spirit of the people he's leading. So here's the bottom line for Tolstoy. The real truth of war, the reality of it, isn't in some grand strategy session. It's in the chaotic, personal, and terrifying experience of a single soldier, right in the thick of it all. And you feel this so powerfully in this one moment, when a young soldier named Nicholas Rostov is in the middle of a brutal attack. He just looks up at the sky and thinks how beautiful the sky looked, so much happiness. But here, groans, suffering, fear. That sudden switch from the total chaos of war to this deeply personal human thought, that is where Tolstoy says the truth is. All right, let's flip to the other side of the coin, peace. Now, you might think, okay, this is where things slow down, but for Tolstoy, peace is every bit as complicated and dramatic as war. It's like a whole universe happening right there in a fancy drawing room. I mean, these sections are just overflowing with what a critic once called a baffling abundance of human life. We're thrown right into these glamorous parties and intense family dramas of the Russian aristocracy. And check out what everyone's worried about. It's not cannons, it's inheritances, it's not battle plans, it's marriage proposals, it's gossip, debts, duels, affairs. Believe me, it's its own kind of battlefield, and the stakes feel just as high. And listen to this bit of gossip from one of the characters. 40,000 serfs and millions of rubles. I know it all very well, for Prince Vasily told me himself. You can just feel the scheming, can't you? The constant maneuvering for money and status that drives their entire world. So you've got these two huge, sprawling worlds, war and peace. But to really understand what ties them together, you have to understand the man who wrote it all, Tolstoy himself. And let me tell you, he was a walking contradiction. The writer Henry James had this amazing description of him. He called Tolstoy a monster harnessed to his great subject, all of life. And honestly, Tolstoy's own life was just as big and messy and full of contradictions as his novel, which is probably why he understood people so well. Because on the one hand, you have Tolstoy, the wise old moralist. This is the guy who preached about nonviolence and inspired people like Gandhi and Martin Luther King. And then you open his private diary and you find him writing this: I must have a woman. Sensuality doesn't give me a moment's peace. That incredible conflict inside him between what he wanted to be and what he felt, that is the engine that powers this entire book. So Tolstoy basically poured all of his own internal struggles into this novel, and it's that deep, honest understanding of human nature that makes his ideas about history and power feel so incredibly relevant, even today. I mean, get this. Tolstoy's critique of Napoleon's invasion was so spot on that it felt like a prophecy. When Hitler invaded Russia in the 1940s, people pointed out the chilling similarities: a grand new system or order, with Russia being the one country that wouldn't fit in. The goal was the same: total destruction. And just like Tolstoy predicted, the outcome was the same: a total catastrophic failure. He saw the pattern. And Tolstoy had a theory for why these conquerors always fail. One critic sums it up beautifully with a little allegory about a woman named Gerda, who basically represents this conqueror mindset.
So the idea is this: the conqueror wants the result. They want the empire, the power, but they have total contempt for the actual process. The slow, messy human work it takes to build and run a society. And because of that contempt, the only thing their empire can be built on is fear. And for that reason, it just can't last.
So just let that sink in for a second. This critique of power from the 1860s, this idea that pure force, without any respect for the human process, is ultimately doomed. How much does that resonate in the world we're living in right now? So when you get right down to it, the big idea of War and Peace isn't just one simple thing. The real genius of the book is that it lives in the tension between all these huge ideas: the individual person versus the giant sweep of history, love versus conflict, our search for order versus the reality of chaos. And really, it all boils down to this one huge, timeless question that Tolstoy leaves us with. It's a question that feels more important now than ever. In a world full of these massive, overwhelming historical forces, how on earth do we find meaning in one single human life?